This is the podcast Share Your Story, exploring humanity one heart at a time, where we dive deeply into the stories that make us who we are and show us who we can become. I am your host, Jenny Diltz, and I'm also the founder of Grieving Coach. I can be found at grievingcoach.com. Make sure you subscribe to the show so you don't miss exclusive interviews and some of my own tidbits and insights on grief. Today's guest is Sergeant Major Mario P. Fields. Mario is dynamic personality and highly sought after resource in business and professional circles for professionals looking to create and expand business opportunities. He served 26 years in the United States Marine Corps before transitioning to the private sector as entrepreneur, YouTuber, podcaster, and Department of Labor contractor. Mario has developed, managed, and led diverse teams in the United States, Persian Gulf, Mediterranean Sea, Israel, United Arab Emirates, Africa, Australia, Cambodia, the Philippines, South Korea, mainland Japan, Okinawa, Thailand, Kuwait, Iraq, and Afghanistan. That's quite the list. His reputation reflects unquestionable integrity, resilience, accountability, and he has a strong passion for helping other people achieve their life goals. Thank you so much, Mario, for coming out today.
Jenny, my pleasure, and thank you for that 7-star introduction. I mean, if there's a rating system of 5-star, we're going to go ahead and reconstruct that to give it 7 for you.
Fantastic, because you wrote it. So it's awesome that you're giving yourself 7 stars.
No, it's just the way you narrated it, right? It's the way. So I would have probably messed it up if it were for me. But no, thanks, Jenny. I am so honored and excited to be here with you today.
So before we get into the good stuff, where can people find you?
Thanks, Jenny. People can find me on all social media platforms. That's Reddit, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter as well. You just put my name in search engine, Mario P. Fields, and it will come up. So you can go Mario P. Fields YouTube. It'll come up Mario P. Fields Instagram. I got good search engine optimization, right? Good SEOs. So you put my name in there, and it will all come up.
Nice. So because of your long career in the military, I wanted to bring you on as a special guest for Veterans Day. And I'm sure throughout your service in the United States Marine Corps, you've seen a lot of grief.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us in what ways you and other veterans have been affected by guilt and grief.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jenny. Great question. I mean, I've actually experienced personally um, a lot of grief, and the first one I would like to talk about is when a service member loses their life in training in a training accident or combat. But in most part, we lose a lot of servicemen and women in training accidents. Sometimes you go through this process of why not me? Why was it the 21-year-old and not me? The 31-year-old or the older person? Why did the 18-year-old or 19-year-old have to die in a helicopter crash, or the young captain or the young lieutenant that's a pilot? With the rest of their lives in front of them, why them and not me? Or or if it's a helicopter or some type of training that you just completed, and then the next person either got on that helicopter or that aircraft or whatever, and they died in an accident, you start, the survivor's guilt.
Yeah,
Yeah, lots of survivor's guilt.
I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Coming from a non-military background, thank you for pointing that out, that deaths happen in the training even before you go into combat. Because that's something that I wouldn't have thought about.
Yeah, Jenny, the 26 years and some change that I spent serving in the Marine Corps as a Marine, probably if I had to put a percentage on how much time of that was in combat operations, probably 2%. The
Oh, wow.
other, yeah, the other 98% is, or in the broad scheme of things, is you're training and preparing and developing, your skills, and that's your hard skills and your soft skills, and lots of training and development of skills. And also you're doing a lot of other kind of partnered work, humanitarian, you're volunteering in the communities, you're supporting humanitarian assistance and disaster relief missions in the United States and overseas. So a lot of kind of civic duties that you do that's not combat related. So about
Mhm.
2 to 3% of my 26 years was spent in combat operations or preparing for combat operations, but the other like 97% supporting, volunteering, civic duties, training and development. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for for the majority, well, maybe not, but speaking for myself, I don't think about the civic side of the military. I think of only the combat side when I think of military. So
Jenny, which
that's
is
like,
normal.
okay. I didn't know if that was me and my non-military background or if that was like
No,
a common perception.
no, that's common. I mean, that's common. Think about it. Oh, you're a Marine. Ooh, first to fight, and America's 911 force. I mean, or any service member, and that's okay. That's fine. I mean, that's a belief that not only did you have, but that's a false belief that's developed in a lot of the people who have never served. But
Mhm.
that's a false belief. Like you said, a majority of time we're in the communities. We're doing adopt a highway, cleaning up highways to support, the environment.
Yeah.
Doing, yeah, you're doing career days at your local elementary schools, your middle schools, your high schools,
Mhm.
supporting underserved communities. I mean, I can go on and on. And that's just not the United States. That's even overseas. Lots of volunteerism when we're overseas.
That's amazing.
Hmm.
Thank you for enlightening me.
Anything for you, Jenny. I mean, I'm being authentic, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I
Jenny's
know.
she's an awesome human being.
And I can tell. Mario is just as awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Um, so what helps you when you think about that survivor guilt? What helps you work through it? Because that can be really, really heavy.
Yeah, I don't think it goes away,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think just my belief is that you get to a point where you start to gain a better understanding of it just wasn't your time, and to reflect on the positive, like replace those kind of bad memories and that guilt with some positive memories, and accept that you can't change what happened in the past,
Mm-hmm.
but just accept it and accept that it just wasn't your time. And
Yeah.
the way I bring humor into it is I go, look, Mario, you're 5'2.5" and shrinking. Accept it. That's real. Don't feel guilty. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So same thing, just focus on things you can't change. Accept it and accept that guilt may never go away. But don't let it to paralyze you, and prevent you from moving forward in life. Yeah. And
Yeah.
Jenny, if I may, here's another guilt and grief that a lot of service members, I can speak for me, that I dealt with. Your family. Now, although that roughly 3% of my 26 years was spent, preparing for combat operations, deploying overseas, and so on and so forth. You're busy or training. The combat deployments, believe it or not, we had a training schedule. You prepared. You kind of knew where you were going. You perform your duties. But when
Mm-hmm.
you're training, you're training for all kinds of contingencies. You don't have one specific mission, so you're training for all of them in defense of our nation. But when you train, that requires you to be away from home.
Mm, yeah.
So I was away from my family almost by God. So I would say, if I had to put a metric on it, I would probably say, out of my entire 26 years, if I total up the amount of time I was not in my house, it would total up to like 16 years of the 26.
That is a long time to be away from your family.
There are a lot of times when they will talk about something that occurred, and I will be at the kitchen table or in the living room, and I'll say, when did that happen? Oh, Dad, you were gone. Or yeah,
Mm.
we remember when, your son or your daughter did this when they were 15. I'm like, I don't remember that. Oh, you were gone.
Oh,
So the guilt of, man, I didn't get a chance to make memories. And
yeah.
and then when things start to occur with your children, right? Maybe they're struggling, maybe they have some personal issues, but you start to blame yourself. Was it because I was gone all the time?
Mhm.
Maybe when I was home, maybe I wasn't home mentally. Maybe it's my fault that that my kids are doing drugs or not, or they can't keep a job, or
Yeah.
my marriage is not as good as it should be. Because you know and you start feeling guilty.
Mhm.
You start feeling guilty when your wife and your children struggle in life at points in their life. For me, I started to blame myself because I was
Yeah.
like, I was never home, and when I was home, I wasn't home
Mhm.
mentally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a different type of guilt and grief from
Hmm.
the survivor guilt we talked about earlier. What how do you deal with that? Like the guilt of not being with your family.
Jim, Jenny. So different type of guilt and grief, but the discipline, you right, the way you live through it, pretty much the same. Is again accepting that you were doing your job.
Mhm.
The nation is not free because it is. There's,
Yeah.
there are folks who have a job to keep United States of America free, and that comes at a cost.
Mhm.
And so, understanding that you volunteer to contribute to the ability for an average, a normal American to drive down a normal highway and don't get blown off the road from an improvised explosive device that's on a guardrail. Um, Freedom of speech, freedom, all that stuff. So I accepted that, I was doing my job.
Mhm.
And let's say I was home all the time. Let's say I did have a job where I could spend the preponderance of my time at home. That doesn't mean that I could have prevented some of the life turbulence from occurring
Yeah.
in my marriage or with my adult children. And I
Mhm.
had to change my belief system, just like when we talked about survivor's guilt, where it was like, no, you can't change the past. You can't. It's pretty hard to predict the future. I imagine the future. I never try to predict it,
Mhm.
and just understand that um, things that have occurred that I did not, make occur. Right? I didn't improve. I didn't set conditions for some of these life challenges to occur. It's not my fault. It's not my
Mhm.
fault. And even if I was home and not serving in the Marines, it still probably would have happened.
Yeah.
But it's a process, and I went through it. It took me, I would say, it took me about 3 years, Jenny, to really, really choose to change the way I thought about the survivor's guilt and the way I believe, my belief system on the survivor's guilt, and then my own personal life and my family. It took me about 3 years to really gain some clarity and to be at peace. Hmm.
So I'm imagining that those 3 years of processing and learning and changing your belief system was pretty intense work.
It was, and it was a choice. And this is one thing that one piece of advice I try to give all the transitioning service members and their families and veterans is it was my network. I leverage, my network.
Mhm.
I will mention him. His name is Jerry Washington. He's one of my mentors, and he's one of many, but I like to really mention him is because I use people like him that they did not subscribe to my emotional reactions.
Yeah.
They didn't bring out the pom poms and go, Mario, we understand your frustrations. They didn't try to connect, and he's one of them. And he would listen to me as a sounding board, and he'd go, okay, are you done? Are you done? And I'll say, yeah, Jerry, I'm done. He goes, okay, now let's think. Just think through these. You believe this. Where's the proof? And
Nice.
he helped me and he helped me develop a accurate way of thinking and taking a thoughtful approach to some of these things that were making me grieve and the guilt and those things. So the
Mhm.
network, my network, and more so mentors in my network really helped me get through that kind of 3-year transition
Yeah.
process. Yeah.
Did that transition process come after you retired, or was it while you were still in active duty?
After.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why I believe a lot of things that occur after you get out is because now you're in the bleachers. I'll use that
Mm.
metaphor.
Mhm.
You know, the pace have significantly slowed down. Phones are not ringing. You're in the bleachers. You're not
Yeah.
you're not out there on the field playing ball, Jenny.
Yeah.
So, right, the 22nd time out of life, now you're in the bleachers and you're watching film, you're watching tape, and you're going, man, I've been depressed for 10 years. Wow, didn't even know it. Man, I
Mhm.
I I feel guilty because of the young man who died in a 96 crash, or the young lady who died. You start reflecting.
Yeah.
And you just realize that you were so busy serving and ensuring that you had, your skills were top notch, and you're ready to deploy at moment's notice to defend our nation or our nation's equities, if you will, and make sure your family's good and all these things, all these complexities going on. You never had time to stop and look in the mirror and go, how are you?
Mhm.
And then what are you dealing with? So that's when it happened. As soon as I retired, it was like smoke cleared. Like, man, I'm grieving
Yeah.
and I'm depressed. Like it was interesting.
Do you think there are benefits of waiting until after you retired to have that to experience that depression, that grief?
I can only speak for me, Jenny. I would say the benefits are you have more time to deal with it.
Okay.
You have more time. It's a choice, but you have more time to to leverage your network and resources and people to help you process things that you just didn't really have a lot of time to process when you're in.
Mhm.
Uh, So I believe when I was in, even if I tried to process some of this, the guilt and the grief, I still think it wouldn't have been as effective because I was still so consumed with the day-to-day operations and
Yeah.
training and requirements and emails, and so you're still so consumed
Mhm.
that even though you may identify a couple of things, you're still focused on, training the young people and making sure everybody's got, what they need and so on and so forth. So I think the benefit of getting out is that now you have more time.
And I
I
would
wouldn't
imagine bandwidth and resources too.
Yeah, and let me back up, Jenny. I wouldn't even say more time because you can't get time is time. You have more resources, you have more flexibility.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
And less, perhaps less, fewer responsibilities that need your attention.
right.
Would that be
Yes,
accurate?
yes, totally.
And I think there's a parallel with that, for people right after a death or a major loss occurs. There's so many logistical details um and responsibilities that need to be taken care of, especially after a death occurs. Like
Right.
what to do with the body, death certificates, finances, personal belongings.
Right. And Jenny, another thing in the military is it's a lot of times you don't have time to grieve.
Mhm.
In one example I'll use is we were out in the Mojave Desert. We call it 29 Palms. It's, out there in Southern Cal. But we're doing some training in the Mojave Desert, and the first right before the first training day, we had a helicopter. The engine seized, and it just fell out of the sky. I'm talking maybe yards away from landing, and I'll never forget this. And it was a young male pilot and a young female pilot. They both got killed. They both of them died in that accident. They were on approach. They could see the hangar, where where the landing zone where they land,
Mhm.
in the engine seized. And I still remember going to the hospital, to check on the young man, because they air medevac the young lady to Palm Springs, which was probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours from where we were.
Okay.
And as soon as we got to the hospital, they had just pronounced him deceased. So
Oh wow.
myself and my colonel, who's equivalent to CEO in the private sector, we put our hands on his forehead and we said a prayer for the young man. But here's the deal: the next day, we open up the chapel, and we had the chaplain and the entire squadron, right? The entire unit grieved, but training didn't stop.
Mm.
So the following day, we had training where we needed the helicopters to there were training missions. And so you just had one helicopter, the engine seized, and the two Marines just died feet from where you got to get ready to launch some more. So the grieving process for that unit, for all of us, was maybe 48 hours. So the
That's a very short
48
time.
so what we ended up doing is we were, kind of like the C-suite team. And so with myself and I was a C-level executive consultant as a sergeant major
Mhm.
in the Marines, but in the private sectors as, C-level executive consultant. And the colonel, again, is equivalent to CEO. He goes, I need to fly. I need to get on the first helicopter, show them that it's safe, and I'm willing to get on the first helicopter that gets back up, in the air. And he did that, to show them that, hey, we lost some people. We're going to grieve, but we got to keep training.
Wow.
And we spent about 45 days, lots of flights, lots of you know flight missions with the helicopters, but they didn't have a choice. There wasn't I'm not flying anymore. Are these helicopters safe?
Mhm.
No. And think about how many times when those young Marines and sailors got in those helicopters, how many times that was a re-victim, kind of like a re-victimize of the victim, right?
Yeah,
Reminding
yeah.
you every single day of the death of the two young pilots. yards away. So that's another thing that is a little bit different. Um, I mean, I can only speak from my experience that I notice that's a little different from the private sector is in the military. A lot of times you don't have time to grieve. You're gonna
Mhm.
cry maybe for 24, 48 hours, but training goes on. You got to keep performing.
Yeah. So does
Yeah.
that add to the grief when you transition from military into private sector? Is it like adding to the grief bucket that when you get out, then you have to go through the whole bucket?
I believe so. I know for me that's what it was. It was kind of like Bloom's taxonomy, right? Bloom's
Uh-huh.
taxonomy of how you learn. That's self-reflection. Because when you get out, you naturally. I self-reflected on the journey.
Uh-huh.
You 4 years or 2 years or 26 years or 30 years. There's a point of self-reflection. There's a point of reflection,
Yeah.
and that's the point where things started to surface.
Uh-huh.
It's that point where things slow down and there's not a lot of activity going on that can suppress those memories and
Yeah.
yeah. Where when I was in, there was so much going on off through the education. Your kids are graduating high school, and oh, you're watching the news, and there's floods overseas. Like there's so much going on that I believe it's suppressed those experiences that motivated and inspired grief and guilt.
Mhm.
Then once I got out, all of that went away, and then it was, man, that suicide. Didn't realize how much that impacted me. In
Yeah.
2014. Yeah.
Is
Hmm.
that a high speaking of suicide, that transition period, I would imagine that that's a very tender and vulnerable point for people. Is that does
Yes.
that, like, lead to suicides?
Um. y- You know, Suicide, of course, is very complex, and the unfortunate thing is it's hard to gain a better understanding of the why because that person is gone. So
Mhm.
the one thing I've learned about suicides is it's hard to get empirical data and gain more research on the why, because you can't interview that person
Yeah.
or those people. But what I will tell you is the sense of purpose. A lot of people that I've experienced when they're serving in the military, there's a sense of purpose.
Mhm.
You're serving, right? You're serving to protect the nation's freedom, or you're volunteering, you're improving your community. Maybe you're the first one in your family to do something patriotic when it comes to serving in the military. Maybe you
Yeah.
started some new legacy, or maybe there's a lineage in your family, and now you have purpose. Grandpa served, grandma served,
Mhm.
my dad served. Now I have purpose. But when it's over, it's okay. What's my purpose in life now?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And what I found is I was, for me, I was blessed and lucky because I gained a better understanding of my purpose for living years ago, and it had nothing to do. It's my spiritual belief.
Mhm.
It had nothing to do with the military. But a lot of folks, when they get out, they're like, I feel useless.
Yeah.
Um, what's my purpose? And they get good jobs, but it's like they don't feel like it's meaningful work.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I believe that's a contributing factor to um the depression of, if you don't have purpose and you don't feel like you're really contributing to society, you're not around your comrades, your Marines, and the suffering, right? The funny stories and the deployments and all that goes, and you just feel like you're a hamster on a wheel. I believe that not having a clear purpose can contribute to some of the
Mhm.
factors that potentially will lead to someone making the choice um, for suicide.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm sure there are suicides that happen. I'm sure that there are active military personnel um, who make that choice for whatever reason. Like you said, suicide is complex. What about the guilt and the grief from suicide in the military?
Yeah, I can, again, I remember in 2015, um, this young man, probably about 6'1", just in shape. I probably admired him because he was tall more than anything, Jenny. But I'm joking. But I will never forget, the young man, he just got promoted to a higher rank,
Mhm.
and I went to a ceremony, and I was a keynote speaker at an event after his ceremony, and I was walking out, and he goes, Sergeant Major, and I said, what's going on? He goes, you missed one of your belt loops. And I said, wow. I said, well, you see what happens when you get promoted? Your attention to detail goes up, my friend. And so I fixed it. I fixed my belt and everything. Then I went off and did the event. Not even, I want to say 10 hours later, I get a phone call saying, the young man had hung himself. He didn't show. Yeah, it was about 24 hours later. I got a phone call and said, um, he didn't show up for work, of course. So people said this is not normal. They went to his room, knocked on the door, no answer. They got the master key, and they found him. Found him. He tied some sheets around his neck, wrapped them around these bars on a
Mhm.
wall locker, and he just sat down and hung himself. And he's tall. All he had to do, Jenny, was stand up, and he didn't. Toxicology reports came back. No substance in the system. So he was yeah, yeah.
Whoa.
So no, not he wasn't intoxicated, nothing. And so we had to go up to the hospital to identify his body, myself and my CO. And I'll
Uh-huh.
never forget that. But the guilt for me was, how did I miss? How did I miss the indicators? Where did I fail? I started blaming myself. I'm like, okay, Mario, you interacted with him hours. Why didn't you catch something?
Mhm.
How did you miss it? And I started going back to the first time I met him, because he was only in our he just checked in, he just joined our unit there in Okinawa, maybe about 45 days prior. And I was like, and so I felt guilty. I felt like I felt like I failed.
Mhm.
So, and you start to beat yourself up. I use, kind of that metaphor, but I started to, really, really be hard on myself
Yeah.
internally in private, that, and then I challenged myself. I would never, ever allow that to happen again. I am going to be more vigilant, and I'm going to, but what I found again, Jenny, is who there's probably nothing I could have done
Yeah.
to prevent that choice from that young man. So yes, suicide, the military is not immune to what's going on in the rest of the world. We're just, I believe, a micro, right, dashboard
Mhm.
of some of the life challenges that exist around the world.
Yeah.
But the guilt of, how did I miss it? What's, I should have done this. Yeah, and I don't think that's just for vets and military. I think that's across the board. That's just my belief.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do quite a fair bit amount of work in the suicide field, I guess you could say. Um, and that's often one of the biggest regrets, the biggest challenges that come from that come for survivors after suicide loss is, what could I have done better? What have I missed? Where did I go wrong? Trying to find the why.
Yeah.
And what could I have done to prevent that?
Right. And the big part of that is the closure. I mean, they're gone, and you have
Mhm.
no closure. And
Yeah.
what I found is when you're missing closure, then it creates a lot of unknowns and confusion and imaginations. And like I told you earlier, before we started the show, I used to focus on a lot of things I had no control over.
So in the military, you have a lot of I would imagine that you have a lot of unclosure
A lot.
through the suicides, through the death in training, when you have to pick yourself up like a day after your comrades die in the accident. You just have to keep going. You have to move on. So how do you manage that?
I would say the training, the resilience, the training, the mental training, the physical training, the resilience piece. And it
Mhm.
starts in Marine Corps boot camp, either Paris Island or San Diego for, folks who enlist. And then the officers, of course, there's a variety of academies through officer candidate school in Quantico, the Naval Academy. But that's where the entry level training and development really comes in. That's why the boot camp is so stressful and high demand, because it's to prepare you for life events that a normal person would have time to grieve,
Mhm.
or I want to say a person who's not in the Marines per se. I just speak for Marines.
Yeah.
uh, uh, they may have time to grieve, different type of resources. They can take some PTO, right? Let's take some
Mhm.
days off, maybe a
Yeah.
vacation. Where in the Marines, depending on what training exercise you're in, and well, in the military in general, but depending on what training exercise you're doing, or what mission that you're assigned to, or if you're in combat, you can't, you don't have the luxury,
Mhm.
you don't have the luxury to go, oh man, oh, I need about 4 weeks off, and then let's get back to training with our partners, or let's get back to combat operations. Let's call a timeout for about 30 days.
Yeah.
All right, let us get through this. Let's process it, and bring in some resources and professionals, and then yeah, let's get back. No,
Yeah. Oh man. It's a different lifestyle. A completely different lifestyle.
it is, and the other group of folks I would like to send my positive thoughts and prayers as the first responders. Um, that when now that I'm out and I've had time to self reflect and really gain a better understanding of those who are in the business of protecting and serving, and really don't have a lot of time to process traumatic events. They're first responders.
Mhm.
I mean, and for them, it's daily. So they, although this is for veterans, I would also like to salute, those group of professionals who I know, um, they don't. A lot of them, I believe, don't have time to process the trauma they experience on a daily, if not or weekly, if not daily basis.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know if they have the same kind of resilience training that you do in the military?
I know they do have their specific type of training for their mission, and that's
Mhm.
even in the military. Each not only do each branch of service have their own different type of conditioning and training and development, but even within the military, depending on what your job is, so it's very complex. But at least they try. When I say they, the military, they make a good effort to try to develop um training and development programs, and in hypothetical situations that prepares you to be very resilient, to be very to have endurance,
Mhm.
So when these things happen, you can quickly process, but it doesn't paralyze you. Like it does not prevent you from doing your mission.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I will say, that that's the skill I am thankful for developing as a Marine, where I just have the ability to process information in moments of crisis and not
Mhm.
really react, but respond. And I'm comfortable in crisis. And I attribute that to the training in the military.
What other blessings have you had because of your training and your service in the military?
I would say for me is gaining a better understanding of time. Um, Gaining a better understanding of, you can't control time. I used
Mm.
to always hear people say years ago, poor time management. You have poor time management, or so it would say on a resume or something like that. I have excellent time management. The military taught me is, you can't manage time. That is a Jenny, that's a false belief. You can't, because if I could, there'd be many cold nights. I'd have said, son, come up now. Come on, son, come up. Right?
Yeah.
Or the days it was like 120 degrees, and you have all this equipment on. You got like 80 pounds, 100 pounds on your back. If time stop, it's 8 in the morning and it's 70 and it's nice, low humidity. We're going to manage time today, team. We're going to stop it for how long are we going to stop it, Sergeant Major? Let's stop it and just enjoy this piece.
That would be so amazing sometimes. And it doesn't happen.
No. So the skill of prioritizing. I believe the military did an amazing job of teaching me how to prioritize within 24 hours. Every human being gets 24 hours in the world.
Mhm.
But the military really taught me how to quickly and rapidly not only prioritize, but move priorities based on external factors, based on information, and based on what you know. And then family, how and friends, the importance of spending time and making good memories, if you can, with family and friends, because a lot of times you would have plans and then all of a sudden something would happen overseas, and you're gone, and you're gone for 10 months, 9 months,
Mhm.
and you're like, man, wish I'd spent more time. So
Yeah.
that's another skill, is prioritizing within 24 hours, and then being able to quickly adjust those priorities based off of information, external environment, environmental things that you can't control, and doing them with a level of comfort where you're creating opportunities in crisis, and you're not just reacting in crisis.
It's awesome. I want to go back to what you said about creating memories and opportunities with your family. Um, as a grief coach, that's kind of one of the perks of my profession is that sense that life is short. There's a real sense of mortality. You're not guaranteed the next day.
No.
So make the most of the time that you do have.
Yeah, and Jenny, the military, when I deployed, and I was away from my children when they were young, my wife, it made me gain a better appreciation of them.
Mhm.
My mom, my dad, my brothers, my sister. Like it really, what they say, you never know what you got until it's gone.
Yeah.
Well, the military, they allow you to go.
Here's your opportunity. Go.
I wouldn't even say they allow. You're gonna go. so, so when you're in a profession that you're gone a lot, again, it creates this opportunity for you to reflect. And what I found is that I I loved my wife and my kids and my family a lot more, and I was able to think about the things I would overlook when if I was always next to them, like just my wife's her smile. When if I was home every single day and she smiled, like, all right, babe, that's funny, yeah. But when
Mhm.
you're gone, you're like, she has such a wonderful smile, or her eyebrow. Like you start to really focus on little things that I believe you overlook on a daily basis if you're always next to that person. So,
Mhm.
so the military really, 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 helped me gain a better understanding and appreciation. Heck, just to go get coffee the way I want it made.
It's like a luxury.
Right? Like I'm like, some of you guys are complaining that the line is long at Starbucks, the military. I'm like, this line is not long, and at least we get some Starbucks.
Yeah.
And not try this coffee. What is this? Any other flavors? No, that's all you got, Sergeant Major. Okay, well, let's drink it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, I'm thinking of any other questions that you think would be good to talk about in our time together today.
My if I could, Jenny, my the main point that I would, I want to leave with the listeners and viewers, if you do the video, that are veterans or not veterans, is there are things that are going to occur while living that you have no control over.
Mhm.
Zero. Zero. And go through a process where you go, okay, that happened, a death or relationship may have ended in divorce, whatever, and then reflect on that event. And if you can accurately see where you contributed to the outcome of that event, now you have accurate information where you can make a choice to go, I will never do that again, and
Mm.
accept responsibility that you were part of that outcome.
Yeah.
But conversely, if you do that process and you discover that there's nothing you did or could have done to prevent that from happening, then accept that was out of your control, accept it, and then move on in life, understanding that that experience and that memory may never go away. The brain doesn't have a delete button,
Mhm.
but accept that you had no control over the helicopter crash,
Yeah.
the relationship falling apart because it actually wasn't your fault, or your adult children having issues that have nothing to do with you serving, or you don't feel like you have a sense of purpose, but that's just your belief. There's no accurate data that shows you can still contribute to the 8 billion humans on earth from the last research I did. Don't don't allow things you can't control to be the barrier in your progression in life, but accept both of them. If you
Mhm.
contributed or not, you got to look in the mirror and go, I accept it. And then what's next?
Yeah.
And then use your network, because man, don't try to do it by yourself. That's what I would leave. That's what I wanted to share uh, at the end of this, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yes. Accept it and move on.
One last thing, Jenny. I was talking to someone the other day, and he goes, "What do you think is my issue, Sergeant Major?" I said, I'm gonna give you an image." I said, what major highway do you live near? He said, I-5 in California. I said, if you were driving at about 80 miles per hour today on the I-5 and you looked outside of your window and you saw the driver next to you driving, looking at the rearview mirror, doing 80 miles per hour on an I-5, staring at the rearview mirror, like staring. I said, what would you think? I think he's going to crash. I would get away from him. Like, what is going on? Why is he driving looking in the past? And I said, that's exactly how you're living your life. You're living
Mm-hmm.
your life looking in the past, staring in the past. You're living in the past. You check the past,
Yeah.
but you got to look in the windshield, look forward,
Awesome.
or you're going to crash.
Yeah. 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 So, listeners, veterans, civilians, look forward. Look forward so you can control where you're going to some degree. You can drive your own car where you want to go.
Absolutely, Jenny. And thank you for all those who are serving. I want to say thank you for your service. Thank you for the veterans who've served and those currently serving around the world. Also, the first responders, truly appreciate you. And the families, friends, coaches, neighbors, supporters. Service members can't, I believe it's a little bit more difficult to do what they're doing if they don't have the support from the nation and those in it. So I truly, truly appreciate everyone.
And I echo that gratitude. Thank you so much, Mario, for sharing your goodness, sharing yourself, sharing your experiences with us.
No, you're welcome, Jenny, and of course, I mean, I'm the host and producer of Unarmored Talk podcast. So if I don't remove my armor, we got bigger problems. No, thanks. Thank you so
We lead
much,
by
Jenny. I
example.
absolutely right. So I enjoyed every minute of it. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, Jenny.
Awesome. So check out Mario's podcast unarmored unarmored talk podcast. And um for our listeners who would like to know more about you, where can they find you?
Again, if you want to learn more about me on the podcast industry, like Jenny said, I'm Unarmored Talk podcast. You can find that on your favorite platform, Apple, Google, Spotify, and also YouTube channel. Again, Mario P Fields dash YouTube. There's a playlist, Unarmored Talk podcast playlist. You can watch some amazing videos as well. And last but not least, if you just want to check me out on all the other social media platforms, please put in Mario P Fields in the search engine. And trust me, it all comes up.
Awesome. So it's been another amazing conversation here on Share Your Story, exploring humanity one heart at a time. Thank you again, Mario, for joining us and sharing your story with us. And thank
You're
you.
welcome, Jenny.
A big thank you for the veterans and the first responders for all that you do and all of those who support them. If you appreciated this episode, remember to subscribe to the show so you don't miss out on special subscription only content. And to learn more about what I do at Grieving Coach, you can visit my website, grievingcoach.com, and sign up for my email newsletter. I send out tips, publications, and upcoming events regularly. So until next time, remember that all of our experiences make us who we are, and that you are known and loved in more ways than you could ever imagine. Your voice matters. So share your story.